All right, today we're going to be looking at two-way frequency tables. In a frequency table, we've got values, and in a relative frequency table, we're going to have percentages. The numbers correlate with each other. The values and the percentages are equivalent to each other, but it's important that in a frequency table, we've got numbers, and in a relative frequency table, we're going to have percentages. So this problem says the students in a seaside school are to have extra swimming lessons if they cannot swim. The table below gives information about the students in grades 7, 8, and 9. As you can see, the table is partially filled out. In this particular table, we don't have our totals. So we're just gonna have to go ahead and get our totals, and we're gonna get our totals by just adding straight across. So in grade 7, I've got 120 students that can swim, 60 students that cannot. 120 plus 60 is going to give me a total of 180 students in grade 7. Same thing here, grade 8, 168 students that can swim, 11 students that cannot swim. So if I do 168 plus 11, I get a total of 179 students in grade 8. And last one, 172 students in grade 9 that can swim, 3 students in grade 9 that cannot swim. When you add those two, you're going to get 175 total students in grade 9. In the whole school, this bottom right box always represents our total of the entire sample that we collected data. And so in the entire school, if I add 180 plus 179 plus 175, I can get the total, which is 534 total students in the school. And I can do the same thing for my columns here for can swim. So I have 120 students that are in 7th grade that can swim, 168 students in 8th grade that can swim, and 172 students in 9th grade that can swim, which gives me a total of 460 total students who can swim. Last value missing is the total of my column that cannot swim. So I'm going to just add these values. 60 students, 11 students, and 3. 60 plus 11 plus 3 gives me a total student population that cannot swim from this sample of 74. You should always just double check that your rows and your columns, did that backwards, rows and columns add up. So I just want to make sure 460 plus 74 also equals 534. This table is called a frequency table, and it is a frequency table because it has numbers. Over here on the right side, well, that was A. Over here on the right side, we're going to complete a relative frequency table. Relative frequency. For a relative frequency table, we always want to have percents. It can also be displayed as ratios, but we're a lot more used to looking at percents. So try to stick with percents. To find my percents, I'm going to take my number in the box is my top number of a fraction divided by my total, which is down here in the right, and that'll give me a decimal. So for this first one, if I do 120 divided by 534, that's going to give me this nice long decimal, 0.2247, blah, 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 blah. In order to turn a decimal to a percent, I need to multiply it by 100. So when I multiply by 100, that gives me 22.47. We're just going to round it to the nearest tenth. So first decimal place, so if I look over to the right, that's a 7. It rounds me up. 22.5% of the student population is in grade 7 and can swim. I'm going to do the same thing for cannot swim for grade 7. 60 students cannot swim and are in grade 7. There are 534 total students in my sample, so that gives me a decimal. When I multiply that decimal times 100, I get 11.2% of students are in grade 7 and cannot swim. My total percentage of students in grade 7, I can calculate two ways. I can find 180 divided by 534 and go through this same process on the calculator, or I can simply say 22.5% of students are in grade 7 and can swim. 11.2% of students are in grade 7 and cannot swim. So if I add 22.5 plus 11.2, that will give me a total of 33.7% of students in grade 7. So of my population represented over here in this table, 180 students are in grade 7. That represents 33.7% of our total sample out of that 534. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for these next numbers. 168 divided by 534 is going to give me 0.314 times 100 to turn it into a percent, 31.5, need to round that up because this is a 6, 31.5%. 11 students, grade 8, cannot swim, divided by the total from my sample of 534, gives me 0.020. So when I multiply that times 100, that's going to be 2.0, but that 5 is going to round it up, so 2.1%. To find my total number of students, or my total percentage of students in grade 8, I can just add across. 31.5% plus 2.1% makes 33.6%. So 33.6% of my sample was from grade 8. Last row here, grade 9, 172 divided by 530. 172 total students divided by 534, which is the number of students that I sampled, times 100 to change it to a percent gives me 32.2%. 3 students are in grade 9 and cannot swim, so I'm going to do 3 divided by 3 divided by my total, 534. Multiply that number times 100, and I find out that 0.5, but I want to round it up because 0.56, so 0.6% of students are in grade 9 and cannot swim, so out of my whole sample. To get this column filled out, I'm going to do 32.2 plus 0.6, and that will give me 32.8% of students from my sample were in grade 9. Now, my total here in the bottom corner is going to be 100%. If you're very observing, you'll notice that if I added these 3 numbers, I would actually get 100.1%. And the reason that that happens is rounding error. When we round numbers, sometimes they're not perfect, but we want to stick with 100% because obviously 100% is the number of people, or the percentage of people that we sampled. 2 more quick calculations. 460 total students out of my sample can swim. So to find that percentage, 460 divided by my total sample, 534, multiply that number times 100, and that will give me 86.1%. So 86.1% of my sample can swim. 74 divided by 534 will give me the decimal number times 100. So that number there, 13.9 when I round, because 85, so 13.9% of my sample cannot swim. And just double checking, 86.1 plus 13.9 does indeed add up to 100% like it should. So now that we have this table filled out, we can go ahead and use both tables, the frequency table with raw numbers and the relative frequency table with percentages, and we can use those to answer these questions. How many students need swimming lessons? So the number of students that need swimming lessons are the number that cannot swim. That number is 74. How many students are there in 8th grade? 8th grade, total, 179. I'm using the frequency table because it says how many. Later on, we're going to get to some questions that say what percentage. Then we'll use our relative frequency table. How many of the 7th grade students cannot swim? So of my 7th grade students, here's 7th grade, 60 of them cannot swim. How many students in grades 7 and 8 can swim? So how many students in 7 and 8 can swim? In 7, I have 120 that can swim. In 8th, I have 168 that can swim. So that gives me a total of 288 students in both of those grades that can swim. And then the last question is, how many students are there altogether in grades 7, 8, and 9? Well, we answered that one right here. The total number of students in this sample is 534. G asked us to create that relative frequency table. Remembering that relative frequency always is going to mean percents. And so when the question says, what is the relative frequency of students who are in 8th grade and cannot swim? That is similar to saying what percentage. So the relative frequency of students who are in 8th grade and cannot swim. Looking at my table, here's 8th grade. Cannot swim in 8th grade is this box. So that is 2.1%. Continuing on, it says, what percentage of 9th grade students can swim? So I've got 9th grade can swim. And that is 32.2%. Then I've got what percentage of students cannot swim? Overall total percentage of students that cannot swim is in this box right here. That's 13.9%. And finally, the last question, question K, what percentage of students are 9th graders? So the percentage of students that are 9th graders is 32.8%.